The crate hit the ground with a loud crash. Dust flew up around it as the metal box rolled once, then stopped. Inside, a young alien girl lay still, her body weak, her hands tied behind her back with energy cords that burned every time she moved. Her name was Riven. She was only 16 cycles old, barely an adult by her people's standards, but to them, she was already useless. Her legs were thinner than the others, her eyes too soft, her voice too quiet. In her tribe, strength was everything. If you couldn't fight, you didn't belong. So they threw her here, into a pit full of monsters. She tried to scream when the crate opened, but no sound came out. Her throat was dry from hours without water, and the poison collar around her neck made breathing hard. The sun above the pit burned red, casting long shadows across the cracked stone floor. The shadows moved. They weren't shadows at all. They were monsters. Riven curled into herself, shaking. She had heard stories about this place, the hollow grounds, a deep pit carved into the heart of an old war planet. Long ago, alien armies tested weapons here, and now it was full of creatures left behind, creatures too wild to control, too strong to kill. Something roared in the distance, a long, low growl that echoed through the rocks. Then silence, then a second growl, closer. She blinked slowly. Her body ached. Her legs wouldn't move. Her left wrist was bleeding from the sharp cords. Her stomach screamed for food, but her mind screamed louder. This is where I died. Above the pit, a ship hovered. It was the same one that brought her here. She had begged them not to do it. She cried when her own sister pushed her into the crate, but no one looked back. Now, the engines roared louder, and the ship flew away, disappearing into the orange sky. Riven was alone. With the monsters, a soft hiss made her freeze. One of the creatures was near. Its body was long, like a snake with legs. Sharp teeth lined its open mouth. Its black skin shimmered in the light. It sniffed the air, then turned toward her. Riven held her breath. She couldn't scream. She couldn't run. Then suddenly, a sound broke the air, a sharp whistle, followed by a rock flying straight into the monster's head. It shrieked and turned around. Someone was there, hiding behind a half-broken steel wall. A man. A human. Riven blinked, not sure if she was dreaming. Humans weren't supposed to be here. Her people called them soft-blooded fools and said they were better off used as tools or slaves. But the man standing there didn't look like a slave. He looked strong, focused. His dark hair was messy, and his arms were covered in small scars. He held a metal pipe like a weapon, without a word. He stepped out from behind the wall and ran toward her. The monster charged. The human slid across the ground, grabbing Riven's arms and pulling her behind the crate. The creature slammed into the metal, shaking the whole pit. "Can you move?" the man asked, breathing hard. Riven shook her head. Her voice came out broken. Who are you?" "No time," he said. "They left you here to die, didn't they?" She nodded slowly. "Not today," he whispered. The monster roared again. This time, more growls answered from deeper inside the pit. They were coming. More of them. The human looked around, thinking fast. "Hold on to me," he said. He picked her up, carefully but quickly, and carried her behind the wall he was using as shelter. The space was tight, dark, but safe for now. She looked up at him. "Why are you helping me?" He looked down, his eyes serious. "Because no one helped me when I was left here. And I'm still alive." She stared at him, confused. "You're human," she said softly. "Yeah," he replied, checking a hidden bag on the wall. Inside was a small bottle of water and something wrapped in cloth. "And you're not. Doesn't matter." He opened the bottle, held it to her lips. Small sips. She drank, her hands shaking. It was the first water she had tasted in hours. "What's your name?" he asked. "Riven." "I'm Jace," he said. "I've been here a while, seen others come and go. You're lucky I found you first." Outside, the monsters roared louder. Riven looked down at his hands, strong but gentle. He had scars, but he still helped her. He didn't even know her. She didn't understand it, but in that moment, as the sky darkened and the monsters circled closer, she realized one thing. He wasn't leaving her behind, not like the others, not this time. Riven woke to pain, heat, and the sound of low breathing. For a second, she thought she was dead. Then the weight of something warm pressed against her shoulder. It was a jacket, old and torn, draped across her body. She looked up and saw him. Again, the human sitting just a few feet away, watching the pit walls like a soldier on duty. She whispered, "You didn't leave." He turned his head slightly. Didn't plan to. Riven had never spoken to a human before. She had only heard the stories, that they were wild, unpredictable, too emotional to be trusted. But this one had risked his life to save hers. He didn't even ask who she was or why she had been thrown into this place. He just helped. She tried to sit up, but her arms were too weak. Her head swam with heat, and her throat felt like fire. He noticed. "Easy," he said, handing her a piece of cloth soaked in water. "You're still poisoned. Collar's draining your strength." She touched the metal band around her neck. It pulsed faintly, like it was alive, feeding off her fear. "Why are you here?" she asked. He gave a small smile, but there was no joy in it. "Got caught. Was on a salvage mission. Took one step too close to a border zone. Woke up here." Riven stared at him. "And you survived? 3 weeks so far." She couldn't believe it. No one survived that long in the hollow grounds. Even trained soldiers lasted hours. But this human, this quiet, tired man, had lived through it. "Alone. What's your name again?" she asked. She let the name rest in her mind. It sounded strong, short, solid. Not like the long, cold names her people used. He pulled something from the corner, a rusted container with scratches and dents. Inside were scraps of dried meat and 2 tiny metal cubes. "Eat slow," he said, handing one to her. "These are protein blocks. Not good, but they keep you alive." She bit into one. It tasted like ash and salt, but it filled her stomach just enough to stop the pain. Jace leaned back against the stone. His eyes stayed locked on the shadows. "You were bait," Riven froze. "What?" "They dropped you here to distract the monsters, to give themselves time to escape." "I've seen it before." Her breath caught. So that's what she had been. Not just unwanted, but used. Thrown to the monsters like meat. She wanted to scream. Instead, she whispered, "They called." "And me broken." Jace didn't answer right away. Then he said, "They were wrong." Silence hung between them. But it wasn't empty. It felt like something was building, something heavy, something unspoken. For the first time in her life, Riven felt like she wasn't invisible, she wasn't weak. She had survived, and she wasn't alone. Suddenly, a soft growl echoed through. The pit.jace stood up fast. "They're back," he said. A dark shape moved across the broken path ahead. Then another. Yellow eyes blinked in the dark. 6, maybe 7 of them, crawling low and slow, sniffing the air. He grabbed a piece of metal pipe from the wall. Riven tried to rise, but her knees buckled. Jace caught her with one arm and helped her lean against the wall. "Stay behind me," he whispered. The creatures drew closer. Their feet made no sound. Their skin shifted color with the stone, camouflage so perfect it made them nearly invisible. Then, one of them stepped on a broken bone. The crack echoed sharply. Jace moved. He tossed a chunk of metal far across the pit. It landed with a loud crash, sending dust flying. The monsters froze, then hissed and ran toward the sound. Jace grabbed her hand. Now, they ran. Riven stumbled, half dragged by him. Her heart pounded louder than the growls behind them. They ducked under a broken pipe, turned down a sharp slope, and slid into a narrow tunnel barely wide enough for both of them. They crouched in the dark, not speaking, barely breathing. One of the creatures passed above them, sniffing the air. Riven held Jace's arm, afraid to even blink. Finally, the growls faded. She let go and whispered, "You shouldn't be here." He looked at her, confused. "You don't belong here," she said, voice trembling. "This place, it kills good things." He leaned close, his voice low and calm. "Then let's give it something it's never seen before. A reason to be afraid." Riven stared at him. In his eyes she saw something strange, not fear, not anger, but fire. A quiet, human fire that refused to die. And in that moment, something changed inside her. She wasn't just a girl thrown away. She was with someone who would fight the monsters, not because he had to, but because he chose to. The ground shook. Not a tremble, not a quake. This was deeper, heavier, as if the earth itself feared what was coming. Jay stood still, his hand pressed against the tunnel wall, his eyes staring toward the dark exit. Riven leaned close to him, breathing fast. "What is that?" He didn't answer. Outside, the growls stopped. The hollow grounds went silent, too silent. Even the monsters that hunted without rest had vanished into the cracks. Jace whispered, "It's here." Riven's blood turned cold. "What's here?" He turned toward her. "The Alpha, the one even the monsters run from." She didn't understand. "You've seen it before?" He nodded slowly. "Only once." It was night. The ground broke under its weight. Everything that breathed stopped breathing. "I barely survived." Riven's body felt small, fragile. She had seen dangerous beasts in training programs, in field reports, in prison zones, but this was different. Whatever was coming now, it wasn't just an animal. It was a legend. A low, deep sound filled the pit. Not a growl, not a roar, but a sound like stone grinding against metal. It came from far away, yet somehow felt close, as if it moved through the air and bones at the same time. Jace looked around. "We can't stay here." "But I can't run fast," Riven said. "Then I carry you." Before she could answer, he lifted her into his arms. She was light, too light, a reminder of how little she had eaten, how long she had suffered. Still, she held tight around his neck. They moved quickly through the tunnel. The path bent and narrowed, then opened into a lower chamber filled with wreckage, old machines, shattered glass, and half-buried bones. Jace set her down behind a fallen transport panel. "Stay quiet," he said. "No sound, no light." Riven tried not to breathe. Her heart beat louder than her voice ever had. Every instinct inside her screamed to run, but her body knew better. There was nowhere to run from what was coming, and she saw it, not the whole thing, just its shadow. It moved across the far wall like smoke, but heavier, like it dragged darkness behind it. Limbs too long, shoulders too wide. A tail like a whip dragging through stone. Its eyes glowed, not red or yellow but cold blue, like ice burning in the dark. Jace crouched low beside her. His jaw tightened, but his hands didn't shake. Riven whispered, "How do we fight that?" "We don't," he said. "We survive." The alpha beast stepped into view. It stood taller than any other monster she had seen. Its chest was covered in armor made from broken ship parts. Clawed fingers dragged sparks along the wall. Its breath steamed the air, each exhale slow and steady, like it had all the time in the world. It was hunting, not for food, not for instinct, but for sport. Jace reached into a pouch on his belt and pulled out a glowing shard. It pulsed with weak energy. "What's that?" Riven asked. "Old fusion core, unstable." He gripped it tightly, looked into her eyes. "If it gets too close, I throw this. Might buy us time." "You'll die," she said. He didn't blink. Maybe, but you won't. Riven shook her head. You're not dying for me. Not dying, he said with a small smile. Just stalling. The Alpha turned its head sharply. Its glowing eyes locked on the panel they were hiding behind. It moved one step closer, slow, careful, like it had done this 1,000 times. Riven grabbed Jace's arm. There's another way. What way? I can distract it. My species has a scent trail. If I break the collar, it'll chase me. He froze. That's suicide. It's better than watching you die. Jace looked at her, really. Looked, and something passed between them. Not words, not fear, but a deep connection built in fire and danger. He whispered, "We do it together." She nodded once. He reached into the panel's side, pulled out a broken cable with sparks, still jumping from its end. He held it over the collar. Ready? She closed her eyes. Do it. He slammed the wire onto the collar. It sparked, hissed, then exploded in a flash of blue. The collar cracked, fell off her neck, and hit the floor. The Alpha growled. Louder this time, and began to charge .jace through the fusion core. The explosion lit up the entire chamber. Metal flew. Rocks crashed. The beast screamed. Jace grabbed Riven, covering her with his body. For a few seconds, there was only fire and dust. Then silence. Riven opened her eyes slowly. Her head rang. Her ears buzzed, but she was alive. Jace rolled over beside her, breathing hard, his arm bleeding. The Alpha was gone, for now. Riven sat up, staring at the scorched ground where it had stood. She looked at Jace. Why did you stay? He met her eyes. Because someone should. Riven couldn't hear anything except her own heartbeat. The explosion had taken everything. The light, the sound, the air. Her ears rang, her skin burned, and her vision was dust and shadows. She turned her head slowly. Jace was lying beside, her face down, unmoving. Jace, she whispered, crawling toward him. Blood ran down his shoulder. His back was cut open in several places, torn by sharp debris. His arm was still wrapped around her like a shield. He hadn't let go, even after the blast. Jace, wake up, she said again, her hands shaking as she pulled him onto his side. He groaned, just enough to let her know he was alive. I thought you. She stopped herself. Her voice cracked. Too hard to finish. He blinked slowly, lips dry. Still breathing, she helped him sit against a fallen wall. His chest rose and fell unevenly, and he winced with every breath. You're bleeding too much, she said. You need help. He gave a weak smile. Not exactly a clinic nearby. She pulled the jacket off her shoulders and pressed it against his wound. It wasn't clean, it wasn't much, but it was all she had. You're an idiot, she whispered. Probably, he said, eyes barely open. The chamber was quiet now, the Alpha beast gone, for now. But something in the air had changed. The other monsters hadn't returned. They were waiting. They feared the Alpha too. Riven scanned the space. Half the wall had collapsed. Fire flickered across broken steel, and smoke curled up toward the surface. If they stayed here, they'd both die. If they moved, he might not survive. She stood and looked around for anything useful. Tools, bandages, water, anything. Behind a cracked panel, she found a storage locker with a red cross on it. She broke it open and pulled out an old medical kit. Inside were sealed patches, burn spray, and pain stoppers. She ran back to Jace and dropped to her knees. You saved me, she said, opening the kit. Now let me save you. He didn't stop her. She cleaned the wound carefully, using the spray to numb the burn. His jaw clenched, but he didn't cry out. She placed a kill patch over the deepest cut and held it in place. You've done this before, he said. No, she replied. But I watched others do it. Before they decided I wasn't worth keeping. Jace opened one eye. They're fools. She paused. No one had ever said that to her. Not even her mother. Riven sat beside him, her back against the wall. The silence between them was no longer empty. "It was safe. You could have left me behind," she said. "I couldn't," he whispered. "Why not?" "Because when they threw me in here, no one came. No one looked for me. I swore if I ever saw someone else down here, I'd never let them die alone." She turned her head toward him, her eyes shining. "I didn't ask you to save me." No." She looked down at her hands. "I was ready to die." "And now?" Riven didn't answer. She didn't need to dot in her silence. Something had shifted. She reached over and gently rested her hand on his chest, not for comfort, but to feel the beat of his heart. It was uneven, but strong. "You're not like the stories," she said. "You're not soft. You're not weak." He chuckled once, wincing. "Tell that to the hole in my back." She laughed softly, surprising herself. They stayed there until the smoke began to thin and the sky above the pit turned darker. Night was coming again, which meant colder air and hungrier monsters. Riven stood slowly, her legs still shaky. "We have to move," she said. Jace shook his head. "Not yet. You'll die here, not if you help me walk." She looked at him, then not a dot. She slipped his arm around her shoulder and pulled him up. He leaned on her, heavy, warm, alive. Step by step, they moved out of the broken chamber and into the next tunnel dot, and with every step, Riven realized something strange. She wasn't afraid anymore, because even broken and bleeding, he moved for her. Even in pain, he kept her close. He didn't need armor to be strong. He became her shield. Riven had never seen the world like this, not from the top of a city tower, not from a warship's window, not even through the glass of her childhood room where she once watched stars blink like slow tears. Now, she saw it through the eyes of a human. Broken pipes lit their path with dim blue sparks. The tunnel narrowed, then opened into a silent, ancient room full of scrap and shadow. Jace collapsed against the wall with a sigh, his breath still shaky. She helped him sit, then checked his wounds again. "You should rest," she said. "Will, after we eat." He pulled a tiny ration bar from his belt and split it in half, giving her the bigger piece. She stared at it. "I can't take this." "Yes, you can." She hesitated. "Why would you give me more?" He looked at her like the answer was obvious. "Because you're still healing. And I've had worse." Riven bit the bar slowly. It was dry and bitter, but something about it tasted warm, maybe not the food itself, but the way it was shared. They sat in silence, the air around them quiet but heavy. Riven finally asked, "Why do you care if I live?" He leaned his head back, eyes closed. "Because you're worth it. No one ever told me that. Then let this be the first time." She stared at him. Even with dirt on his face, blood on his shirt, and bruises along his arms, he looked stronger than anyone she had ever met. And it wasn't because of his body. It was because he kept choosing to care. "I thought humans were weak," she whispered. He opened one eye. "And I was wrong." He gave a tired smile. "That's the nicest insult I've heard all week." She laughed, softly but real. Then she turned serious again. "Why do you fight for people who hate you?" He shrugged. "I don't. I fight for those who don't know what kindness looks like yet." She blinked. "That's lonely." "Maybe," he said. "But if one person sees something better because of me, then it's not wasted." Riven looked down at her own hands, scarred, thin, shaking. She had hated them for years, hated how they failed to lift weapons or climb like the others. She had hidden them in shame, but now she opened her palm and placed it next to his dot. His hand was larger, but not rough. "Just warm. Can I ask you something?" she said. "Go ahead." "If we get out of here, will you take me with you?" Jace didn't answer right away. He sat up straighter, stared into her eyes, and said, "I wasn't going to leave without you anyway." That moment hit her harder than anything else. Not the monsters, not the betrayal of her own blood, but that one sentence, because it sounded like a promise, and no one had ever kept one for her before she could say anything else. A faint sound echoed down the hallway, not claws, not growls, but a crackle. She turned her head. "Did you hear that?" Jace nodded. "Yeah, that's not a beast, that's tech." They followed the sound carefully. Through a tight gap in the metal wall, they crawled into a room filled with wreckage. In the center was a glowing panel, dusty, half-buried, but still powered. Jace knelt beside it. "Old Alliance cum station." "You can fix it?" she asked. "Maybe, if the relays still live." He opened the back and began working, pulling. Wires tapping through ruined systems. Riven sat beside him. "You were an engineer?" "Used to be. Before the war. Before I ended up here. And now? Now I fix what I can. And protect what I must." He kept working, fingers fast. Focused, she watched him, really watched him, and for the first time in her life, she wondered what it would feel like to belong to someone, not because of duty, or worth, or power, but because they simply wanted her there. Then the screen blinked. A soft beep. Jace exhaled. "We've got signal." Riven leaned closer. "Who's out there?" "Don't know yet. Could be scavengers, could be slavers, could be a rescue ship." She nodded. "So what now?" He looked at her. "Now," he said, "we see who's listening." And just before he pressed the transmit key, he glanced at her once more and said, "No matter what happens next, we walk out together." The message was out. Jace had activated the signal. A short-range pulse repeating a simple code, one that any nearby ship could catch. But the moment it sent, he fell. His knees buckled, and he dropped hard to the ground. "Jace!" Riven rushed to him. His face had gone pale. His lips were dry. Sweat clung to his skin, and his wound had soaked through the medical patch. He tried to speak, but only a breath came out. "No," she said, lifting his head into her lap. "You're not allowed to die now." He tried to smile. "Just tired. You lost too much blood." Riven looked around the ruined room. No supplies, no more water, no way to lift him on her own. Her hands trembled as she held him, but something inside her had changed. She wasn't the girl who had been thrown away anymore. She was someone who had something to protect. She moved fast. First, she tore her sleeves and wrapped his chest tighter. Then she found a cracked oxygen mask and placed it over his mouth, connecting it to a half-broken tank. He coughed, then breathed steadier. Next, she pulled his knife from his belt and crouched by the doorway. She had no training, no skill, history of courage, but she had him. And that was enough. The hallway outside rattled. Claws scraped metal. One of the hunters had picked up their scent. It crept closer, long limbs dragging across the wall. Its body was hunched and sharp, its mouth split in too many directions. It hissed softly, testing the air. Riven gripped the knife. Her heart pounded in her chest. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She waited. When the creature lunged into the room, she rolled to the side, slashing upward. The blade cut deep across its shoulder. It screamed, spinning back toward her. Riven grabbed a steel rod from the floor and slammed it into the beast's jaw. It staggered. She didn't stop. She hit it again and again, until it fell, twitching, and didn't rise. Her breathing was heavy. Her arms shook. But she was still standing. Behind her, Jace whispered, "You ... killed it." She dropped the rod, ran back to him, and knelt by his side. "Don't try to move. Just breathe." He smiled. Weakly, "You fight like a human." She leaned close and whispered, "I fight for you." He closed his eyes again, but his hand found hers and didn't let go. Hours passed. Riven stayed beside him, listening for more monsters, watching the signal light blink. It was the only sound in the room besides his slow breathing. She felt the burn of hunger in her stomach, the ache in her legs, the pain in her back, but she didn't stop watching. Then, in the distance, a different sound. Engines. Faint. Flaring. A ship. Riven jumped to her feet, ran to the doorway. Blue lights flickered. Far above the pit, growing brighter, closer. She waved her arms, grabbed a glowing panel shard, and raised it high. The ship hovered, then dropped a small beacon. A voice crackled through the old speaker. Signal received. 2 life forms detected. Stand by for pickup. Riven ran back too. Jace, tears in her eyes. We're going home. His lips moved. Didn't think I'd see it again. She lifted him, pulled his arm over her shoulders, and began to walk. Each step hurt, but she didn't stop, not when the monsters howled. In the dark again. When the wall shook, not even when the pit beneath them roared one last time. She walked toward the light, with Jace beside her, broken, bleeding, but alive. The ship's doors opened with a hiss, flooding the hangar bay with white light. Riven stepped in, her arm shaking under Jace's weight. She had dragged him up from the monster pit, across metal bridges and fallen stone, through pain and fire and blood. And now they were inside. Humans in black uniforms rushed to help. One of them lifted Jace onto a floating stretcher. A woman pressed a scanner to his chest, then turned to Riven. He's critical, but stable. Riven stood frozen. She watched his body float away toward the medbay, still breathing but unconscious. And for the first time since the crate door had slammed shut above the hollow grounds, she felt like her own chest could rise again. She had saved him. She had fought. She had lived. A man approached her. Not a soldier, a commander. His eyes were calm but sharp. "You're not one of ours," he said. "No," Riven replied, voice soft but firm. "I'm not. You were in that pit with him?" "Yes." He looked at her face. "And you?" "Made it out. I carried him." The commander paused, then nodded once. "You both must be something rare." She didn't answer. He turned and walked away, leaving her alone in the hallway. She wandered through the ship, bare feet silent on the clean floor. No alarms, no growls, no darkness. Only lights and smooth walls, and strange smells that weren't blood or fire. Everything felt too quiet. Too easy. She hated it. Her hands trembled. Her muscles ached. But she didn't rest. Not until she found the med bay. Jace was there. Tubes in his arms, monitors tracking his heartbeat. He looked peaceful now, almost too still. She pulled a chair beside him and sat down. No one tried to stop her. She took his hand gently, rested it in both of hers, and placed her forehead against it. "I was born to be discarded," she whispered. "That's what they told me, that I was a mistake, a flaw. A mouth too soft, a voice too small, hands not strong enough to hold a blade." She looked at him. "But you never asked me to be perfect. You just asked me to hold on." His eyelids moved slightly. She smiled. "I did." Hours passed. She stayed. The lights dimmed and rose again, and still she stayed. Then, his eyes opened, slow, tired, but clear. "You made it," he whispered. She leaned forward, squeezing his hand. "We made it." He smiled faintly. "I told you I wouldn't leave you behind. And I told you," she said, voice trembling, "if you died, I'd burn the whole world." He laughed, weak but real. "You scare me a little," he said. She leaned closer. "Good. That means I'm learning from you." Silence settled again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was warm. A nurse stepped in. "He needs to rest." "You should too." Riven shook her head. "Not yet." The nurse hesitated, then left them alone. Jace looked at her through heavy eyes. "What now?" he asked. Riven stood slowly, brushing her hair back behind pointed ears. "Now," she said, "I'm not going back to them. To your people, to anyone who thinks I'm broken," he smiled. "You're not. I know that now." She stepped closer, leaned down, and rested her forehead against his. "I don't belong to them anymore," she whispered. He looked at her, eyes soft, tired, but alive. "You belong with me?" She didn't answer. She just held his hand tighter. Outside, the stars moved across the glass, quiet, endless, watching. And in that ship, far from the pit, far from the monsters, far from everything that once hurt her, she finally found something real. Not safety. Not victory. But something greater. Someone who saw her and stayed.